Story 1. Summer Camp, Bloody Lake. A new legend, the screams cut through the night like broken glass.
Jason Martinez bolted upright in his cot, heart hammering against his ribs.
Sweat soaked his camp counselor shirt. The digital clock glowed 3:17 a.m. Those weren't the usual sounds of kids having nightmares or sneaking snacks. These screams carried something else. Something wrong. He grabbed his flashlight and stumbled outside his cabin. The summer air at Kendall Lake should have been warm, but goosebumps crawled up his arms. The screaming had stopped. Now only the lapping of dark water against the shore broke the silence. "Hello," Jason called out, his voice cracking like a 13-year-old. "Is anyone out there?" Nothing. He swept his flashlight beam across the camp. 23 cabins dotted the shoreline, each housing 8 kids between ages 10 and 16. Camp Bloody Lake had earned its name from the red clay that stained the water during spring runoff. Local Cree legends spoke of different reasons for the name, but those were just stories meant to scare tourists. The beam caught movement near the water. 3 figures stood at the lake's edge. Girls in old-fashioned dresses, the kind from history books about the 1920s. Long sleeves, high collars, skirts that touched their ankles. Their backs faced him. "Hey!" Jason shouted, jogging toward them. "You can't be out here this late. Get back to your cabins." The figures didn't move. As he got closer, he could hear them singing. Their voices harmonized in a tune he'd never heard before, words in a language that wasn't English. The melody made his skin crawl. 20 feet away, he stopped. The girls looked like they were maybe 14 or 15. Cousins, from their similar builds and dark hair. But their clothes were wrong. Way wrong. Those dresses looked genuinely old, not costume party old. Faded fabric. Real wear patterns. "Girls, I need you to." They turned around. Jason, his flashlight fell from his numb fingers. It hit the ground and went out. The girls had no faces. Just smooth skin where features should be. No eyes, no noses, no mouths. Yet somehow, impossibly, they kept singing. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. "The time of payment is blood," they sang in perfect English now. "The time of payment is blood." Jason scrambled backward, tripped over a rock, and crashed into the dirt. When he looked up, the girls were gone. Only the gentle lapping of waves remained. He found his flashlight and clicked it on with shaking hands. The beam revealed nothing but empty shoreline and the dark water of Kendall Lake stretching toward the Canadian wilderness. Back in his cabin, Jason convinced himself it was a nightmare. Stress from his first summer as head counselor. Too much responsibility for a 22-year-old college kid. The camp director had warned him about the isolation getting to people. Kendall Lake sat 40 miles from the nearest town, surrounded by dense forest and connected to civilization by a single dirt road. He'd been running this American horror story through his head for weeks. What if something happened to one of the kids? What if he screwed up? What if the old legends about this place turned out to be more than just creepypasta for campfires? Jason forced himself to lie back down. Tomorrow he'd laugh about this. Ghost stories always seemed silly in daylight. The next morning brought chaos. 3 tents near the lake shore were destroyed. Not collapsed or knocked over. Destroyed. The fabric hung in ribbons, like something with claws had shredded them from the inside out. Sleeping bags were torn apart, stuffing scattered across the campsite like snow. But the weird part was the kids who'd been sleeping in those tents. They stood in a perfect line by the water, staring out at the lake. 6 of them, ages 12 to 15. They didn't respond when Jason called their names. Didn't flinch when he clapped his hands right next to their ears. "Sarah, Tommy, can you hear me?" He waved his hand in front of Sarah Chen's face. The 13-year-old didn't blink. Her eyes stayed fixed on something in the distance. The other counselors gathered around. Beth, the arts and crafts instructor, looked pale. "What happened to them?" "I don't know," Jason said. "They won. T-talk. Want to move unless we physically guide them." Mike, the lifeguard, crouched next to one of the destroyed tents. "Look at this." He held up a piece of fabric. Long scratches ran through it in parallel lines, like claw marks. But the scratches went through multiple layers. Whatever made them had serious strength. "Bear?" Beth suggested. "Bear's done to typically shred tents from the inside," Mike said. "And look at the pattern. Too deliberate. Too organized." Jason studied the destruction. Mike was right. This wasn't random animal damage. The tiers formed almost geometric patterns, like some kind of supernatural ritual had taken place. He thought about the three girls from the night before, the faceless figures in 1920s dresses. Had he really seen them, or was his mind trying to make sense of something that couldn't be understood? We need to call the camp director, Beth said, and maybe the police. With what phone? Jason gestured toward the forest. We'd completely cut off out here. Radio has been acting up all week. That was another thing that had been bothering him. The camp's emergency radio usually picked up clear signals from town. But for the past 7 days, it had only produced static and strange whispers that almost sounded like voices. So what do we do? Mike asked. Jason looked at the 6 kids still standing motionless by the water. Their parents had trusted him to keep them safe. He failed on day 8 of a month-long camp session. We pack up, he decided. Everyone, right now, we're driving back to town. But when they tried to load the kids into the camp's old school bus, they wouldn't budge. The 6 affected children stood rooted to their spots like trees. No amount of coaxing, pleading, or gentle force could move them more than a few inches from the water's edge. It's like they reconnected to the lake somehow, Beth whispered. The other 17 kids watched with wide, scared eyes. They'd been asking questions all morning. Where were their friends? Why wouldn't Sarah and Tommy talk to them? What had made those horrible scratches on the tents? Jason had no answers. He was supposed to be the adult in charge, but he felt more lost than any of the kids. As the day wore on, the 6 affected children began to change. Their skin grew pale, almost translucent. Dark circles appeared under their eyes. By afternoon, they looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. Jason, Beth pulled him aside. Look at their reflections. He followed her gaze to the lake's surface. The 6 kids stood at the water's edge, but their reflections showed something else entirely. In the water, they wore old-fashioned clothes, 1920s dresses and suits. Their reflections moved independently, turning to look at each other, gesturing, mouthing words. This is impossible, Mike said. Reflections done to work that way. Jason's blood felt like ice water. Last night, I saw 3 girls by the lake. They were wearing dresses just like that. He told them about the faceless figures, the singing, the words about payment in blood. Beth and Mike listened with growing horror. We need to get the other kids away from here, Beth said. Now, but when they tried to load the unaffected children onto the bus, the engine wouldn't start. Jason turned the key over and over. Nothing but clicking sounds. Mike popped the hood. Battery? It's dead. But that is impossible. We just replaced it last week. Check the radio, Jason said. Beth ran to the main office and came back shaking her head. Did too. Everything electrical in the camp just stopped working. They were trapped. As evening approached, Jason made the decision to gather all the unaffected kids in the main lodge, the largest building in camp. It sat on higher ground, away from the lake. If something supernatural was happening here, distance from the water might help. The 6 affected children remained by the shoreline, standing like sentinels in the growing darkness. I want to go home, 10-year-old Marcus said. Tears ran down his cheeks. We all do, buddy, Jason said. But right now, we need to stick together and stay brave. Is this place haunted? Asked Lily, one of the older girls. Jason didn't know how to answer. 3 days ago, he would have laughed at the question. Now, watching his reflection flicker strangely in the lodge windows, he wasn't sure of anything. There are stories about this lake, he said carefully. Old stories from before the camp was built. What kind of stories? Several kids asked at once. Jason glanced at Beth and Mike. They nodded. The kids deserved to know what they might be facing. The Cree people who lived here called this place, where the water remembers, Jason began. They said the lake held onto the spirits of people who died with unfinished business, especially violent deaths. But that is just a legend, right? Marcus asked hopefully. I thought so, Jason admitted. But in the 1920s, something happened here. A family came to fish and camp, parents and 3 daughters. They never made it home. He researched the area, its history when he first got the job. Most of it was standard stuff. Logging, mining, gradual settlement by white homesteaders. But one story had stuck with him. The Whitmore family disappearance. Search parties found their camp destroyed, Jason continued. Tents shredded. Supplies scattered. But no bodies, no blood, no trace of what happened to them. What about the girls? Lily asked quietly. Missing. The 3 daughters. All teenagers. Emma, Rose, and Catherine Whitmore, ages 13, 14, and 15. The lodge fell silent except for the wind through the trees outside. The search went on for weeks, Jason said, but they never found anything. Local Cree elders said the lake had claimed them, that their spirits were trapped in the water. That's what I saw last night, Jason realized aloud. 3 girls in 1920s dresses. The Whitmore sisters. But why now? Mike asked. Why are they appearing after all these years? Jason didn't have an answer, but as if responding to the question, a sound drifted through the lodge windows. Singing, the same harmonized voices he heard the night before. The kids pressed against the windows, trying to see out into the darkness. There, Lily pointed. By the water, 3 figures stood at the lake's edge. Even from a distance, Jason could see their old-fashioned silhouettes. The 6 affected children had moved to stand behind them, forming a larger group. The time of payment is blood, the ethereal voices sang. The time of payment is blood. Payment for what? Beth whispered. The singing grew louder, more insistent. And now Jason could hear other voices joining in. Deeper voices, adult voices, as if the entire Whitmore family was gathering by the water. Everyone away from the windows, Jason ordered. Now, but it was too late. The glass began to vibrate. Cracks appeared in spiderweb patterns across each pane. They were coming, Marcus said in a small voice. The front door of the lodge rattled. The handle turned slowly. Jason grabbed a chair and wedged it under the door handle. Back exit. Everyone move. They rushed toward the rear of the building as the front door shook more violently. The singing grew so loud it seemed to come from inside their heads. But when they reached the back door, it wouldn't open. The handle turned freely, but the door itself wouldn't budge. It was like something massive was pressed against it from outside. Windows, Mike said, but the glass was now completely spiderweb. Touching it would likely bring the whole pane down in sharp fragments. They were trapped in the lodge with whatever was coming through the front door. The chair Jason had wedged under the handle began to slide across the floor. Invisible hands seemed to be pushing the door open despite the barricade. Under the tables, Jason whispered, "Everyone get under the tables and stay quiet." The kids scrambled to hide as the front door finally swung open. Footsteps entered the lodge, multiple sets, moving in perfect synchronization. The floorboards creaked under weight that seemed both heavy and impossibly light. Jason peered out from under his hiding spot. The 6 affected children walked through the doorway. But they moved wrong, like marionettes controlled by amateur puppeteers. Their feet barely touched the ground. Behind them came the 3 girls in 1920s dresses. In the darkness of the lodge, Jason still couldn't make out their faces clearly. But he could feel their attention sweeping the room, searching. "We know you, here," one of them said. Her voice sounded like wind through dry leaves. "We can smell your fear." The supernatural presence filled the lodge like cold fog. Jason's breath came out in visible puffs despite the summer heat. 100 years, another voice said. 100 years? We waited. Waited for what? Jason found himself asking, standing up from his hiding place. The 3 figures turned toward him. This close, he could see that they did have faces, but they shifted and blurred like reflections in disturbed water. Sometimes they looked like normal teenage girls. Sometimes they were rotting corpses. Sometimes they were just shadow and bone. "Justice," the 3rd girl said. "Our family came here in 1924. We were murdered." "By who?" Jason asked. "The men who built this camp," the 1st girl replied. "They wanted our land. Our father wouldn't sell." Jason felt sick. The official camp history made no mention of the Whitmores owning this property. No mention of violence or forced acquisition. "So they killed us," the 2nd girl continued. "Cut our throats and threw us in the lake. Told everyone we disappeared." "But you came back," Jason said. "We never left," all 3 said in unison. They've been in the water, growing stronger, waiting for the right moment." "Why now?" "Because the lake is full," the 1st girl said. "Full of pain and fear from all the children who've come here over the decades. Every homesick tear, every nightmare, every moment of terror has fed us." Jason thought about all the summer camps that had operated here over the years. Thousands of kids experiencing the normal fears and anxieties that came with being away from home. All of that emotional energy soaking into the water, building up like pressure in a dam. "What do you want?" he asked. "What was taken from us?" the 2nd girl said. "Life. The children the affected, will join us," the 3rd girl finished. "Young souls, afraid and far from home. Perfect vessels for our return." "No," Jason said firmly. "I won't let you hurt them." The three spirits laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of bones. You think you can stop us? The first girl asked. We're just one man. We are the accumulated suffering of a century. Maybe, Jason said. But not just any man. I'm their counselor. It's my job to protect them. He'd never been particularly brave.
Growing up in suburban Phoenix, his biggest fear had been giving presentations in high school speech class.
But looking at these kids hiding under tables, depending on him, something changed inside Jason Martinez. Besides, he added, you were wrong about what feeds you. What do you mean? The second girl asked. You said the lake is full of children, is fear and pain. But that is not all that has happened here over the years.
There's been joy too.
Friendship.
Kids overcoming their fears, gaining confidence, making memories that last forever.
The spirits' forms flickered, becoming less solid.
Every kid who learned to swim in your lake, Jason continued. Every friendship that started around your campfire, every moment of laughter and discovery.
That is in the water too. Lies. The third girl snarled, but her voice sounded weaker. No, Jason said, gaining confidence. I read the camp records going back 70 years. Thousands of kids have had the best summers of their lives here. That positive energy is part of this place just as much as any fear. The 6 affected children began to stir, their puppet-like movements becoming more natural. Sarah, Jason called to the nearest girl.
Can you hear me?
Sarah Chen blinked, confusion replacing the blank stare she'd worn all day. Jason, what is happening? Why am I standing in the lodge? The 3 spirits shrieked, their forms becoming more transparent.
Remember the good times, Jason told all the kids, the ones hiding and the ones who'd been possessed.
Remember making friends, learning new skills, conquering fears. Remember that this place has been home to joy, not just horror. I remember, said Tommy, another of the affected children. I remember catching my first fish yesterday. Before, whatever this is. More kids began to speak up, sharing positive memories from their week at camp. With each happy recollection, the Whitmore spirits grew fainter. This one, to work, the first girl said desperately.
Our pain is stronger than their joy.
Is it? Jason asked. Your pain is from one horrible night a century ago. Their joy is from decades of summers, thousands of kids, millions of happy moments. Which do you think has more power? The spirits were barely visible now, like heat mirages. We just wanted justice, the second girl whispered. Then take it, Jason said. But not from innocent children. The men who hurt you are long dead. Their descendants probably done, to even know what happened. But you know what would really honor your memory? What? All 3 asked. Let this place be what it's become. A place where kids feel safe, make friends, grow stronger. Don, to let the evil that was done to you spread to another generation. For a long moment, the lodge was silent except for the sound of children breathing. Then the first Whitmore sister spoke, and her voice sounded younger, more human. We were so angry for so long. We forgot who we used to be. We were just kids too, the second girl added. Scared kids, the third girl agreed. I know, Jason said gently. And I'm sorry for what happened to you. It was wrong, and it was evil, and you deserved so much better. The spirits solidified briefly, and Jason could see them clearly for the first time. 3 normal teenage girls in old-fashioned dresses. They looked tired, not terrifying. Will you help us rest? The first girl asked. How? Tell our story, the second girl said. Make sure people know what really happened here, and keep the children safe, the third girl added. That is all we ever wanted. To be safe, I promise, Jason said. The 3 spirits smiled, and for a moment they looked exactly like the happy teenagers they should have been allowed to grow up to be. Then they faded away, dissolving into motes of light that drifted out through the cracked windows. The lodge fell silent, real silence this time, not the oppressive quiet that had filled the camp for the past day. Is it over? Little Marcus asked from under his table. Yeah, Jason said, surprised to find that he meant it. It is over. The next morning, all the camp's electrical equipment worked perfectly. The radio crackled to life, and Jason was able to contact the director and arrange for early pickup for any kids who wanted to go home. About half chose to leave. The other half, surprisingly, wanted to stay for the rest of the session. This is the most interesting thing that has ever happened to me, Sarah Chen said. Plus, I finally caught that fish I was after.
Jason spent the remaining 3 weeks of camp documenting everything he could find about the Whitmore family. He contacted local historians, searched old newspaper archives, and interviewed Cree elders who still remembered stories passed down from their grandparents. The true story gradually emerged. The Whitmores had indeed owned the land where Camp Bloody Lake now stood. They'd been murdered by a group of local men who wanted to develop the area for logging. The killers had told authorities the family had simply disappeared, and without bodies, no investigation had taken place. The men had prospered from their crime, eventually selling the land to developers who built the first incarnation of the summer camp in the 1940s. Jason wrote it all down. Every detail, every name, every injustice. He sent copies to newspapers, historical societies, and the local band council. The story of the Whitmore murders finally became part of the official record. But late at night, when the camp was quiet and the lake reflected stars, Jason sometimes wondered if the spirits had really moved on. He to hear singing drifting across the water. Not the terrifying harmony of that awful night, but something softer. Almost peaceful, like a lullaby. And sometimes, when kids were having particularly bad homesickness or nightmares, he finds small gifts by their cabins in the morning. A perfectly smooth stone, a feather from a bird that didn't live in the area, a flower that shouldn't bloom in summer. Little signs that someone was still watching over the children of Camp Bloody Lake. The campers started calling them guardian gifts. They compare finds at breakfast, trying to figure out which spirits had left what tokens. "I think Emma left me this pine cone," one girl announced. "It was right by my pillow when I woke up." "Rose definitely gave me this cool rock," another kid claimed. It was shaped like a heart. Jason never confirmed or denied these theories. Let the kids believe in friendly ghosts if it helped them sleep better. On the last night of camp, as he was doing his final rounds, Jason stopped by the lake shore. The water was calm, reflecting the full moon like a mirror. "Thank you," he said quietly to the night air. He wasn't sure if he expected a response, but he got one anyway. A gentle breeze stirred the water, creating ripples that caught the moonlight. And for just a moment, Jason could swear he saw 3 young women standing at the water's edge. Not the terrifying spirits from that awful night, but the girls they should have been. Happy, peaceful, free. They raised their hands in farewell, then faded back into moonlight and memory. Jason drove away from Camp Bloody Lake the next morning with a van full of tired, happy kids and a story he'd never forget. He returned to finish his teaching degree, but he always remember his summer as a counselor at the most haunted place in Saskatchewan. The camp continued to operate for several more years. Kids still got homesick, still had nightmares, still faced the normal fears that come with growing up. But they also made friends, gained confidence, and learned that even the scariest situations could be overcome with courage and community. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the moon was full, counselors reported hearing gentle singing drift across the water. Not words of anger or revenge, but something that sounded almost like a blessing. A lullaby for children far from home, sung by the spirits of 3 girls who had finally found their peace. The camp closed permanently in 2019, not because of ghosts, but because of budget cuts and changing recreational preferences. The buildings were demolished, and the land was returned to the Crown. But local Cree elders still tell stories about the lake. Not scary stories meant to frighten tourists, but respectful tales about spirits who learn to let go of their anger and find rest. They say the water runs clearer now. Fish are more plentiful. Birds nest in greater numbers along the shore, as if the lake itself is healing from old wounds. Jason Martinez went on to become a high school history teacher in Saskatoon. He married Beth, the arts and crafts counselor who helped him through that terrifying summer. They have 2 daughters of their own now. Sometimes, when his girls ask about his camping days, Jason tells them about the summer he learned that the most important part of any scary story isn't to the scares. It is how the people in the story choose to face their fears. And how even the angriest spirits can find peace if someone is brave enough to listen to their pain and help them remember who they used to be. But late at night, when thunderstorms roll across the Saskatchewan prairie, Jason still dreams about 3 girls in 1920s dresses. In his dreams, though, they were not faceless or terrifying. They were just teenagers, laughing and singing by a moonlit lake, finally free to be the children they never got the chance to become. And in his dreams, the lake runs red not with blood, but with the reflection of northern lights dancing across water that remembers everything. Both the horror and the healing. Both the fear and the love. Both the ending and the beginning of every ghost story that was ever true. Story 2. Suicide Lighthouse. The last beacon of light, the flashlight beam cut through Marcus' eye socket like a knife through butter. Blood poured down his cheek as he pressed deeper, twisting the metal handle. The pain was nothing compared to what he'd seen. What she'd shown him. What waited beyond the beam of Peggy's lighthouse every Friday at midnight. "It's your turn," she whispered, and now he understood why. 3 weeks earlier, Marcus had thought Nova Scotia would be his fresh start. The docks in Portland were laying off, and the Canadian fishing boats needed experienced longshoremen. He packed his life into a Ford pickup and driven north, chasing work and running from a divorce that had stripped him of everything except his ability to move cargo. Peggy's Cove was postcard perfect. Tourist boats, lobster rolls, the famous lighthouse perched on granite rocks like something from a painting. Marcus found a room above Murphy's pub and started work on the fishing boats that came in with the dawn tide. It was old Jimmy Russo who first mentioned the woman. "You see her yet?" Jimmy asked on Marcus, this third Friday night, beer foam stuck in his gray beard. "See who?" "The lady in blue. Shows up every Friday, rain or shine. Throws herself off the point near the lighthouse." Jimmy, his eyes went distant. "Been happening for years. Decades, maybe." Marcus figured it was local ghost story nonsense. Every coastal town had them. Phantom ships, drowned sailors, women in white walking the shore. Standard American horror fodder that kept the tourists interested. Then he saw her himself. It was past 11 on his first Friday night off. Marcus couldn't sleep, so he walked down to the harbor for some air. The lighthouse beams swept across the water in steady intervals. Comforting, hypnotic. That's when she appeared. A woman in a blue dress stood on the rocky point 50 yards from the lighthouse. Even in the dark, Marcus could see she was young. Pretty. Her dress fluttered in the ocean wind like something from the 1950s. She didn't hesitate, didn't look around, just walked to the edge and jumped. Marcus ran toward the rocks, pulling out his phone to call for help. But when he reached the point where she'd fallen, there was nothing. No body in the water, no ripples, no splash, just the lighthouse beam, sweeping endlessly across empty ocean. "You saw her too," Jimmy said the next morning. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded. "Who was she?" Name was Margaret Hale. Peggy, they called her. Lighthouse keeper, his daughter back in the 1950s. Story goes she was waiting for her boyfriend to come back from the war. Korea, I think. He never did. The supernatural explanation felt too easy. Too much like every creepypasta Marcus had ever read online. But he couldn't shake the image of her falling. The way she moved with such certainty. Such purpose. The next Friday, he went back. This time he brought a camera. If this was some kind of local hoax, he documented it. If it was real, well, ghost footage went viral on YouTube all the time. Maybe he could make some money off this weird place. She appeared at exactly 11:47 p.m. Same dress, same movements, same jump. But this time, as Marcus filmed, she turned and looked directly at him before she fell. Her eyes were black holes. Not dark, not brown, holes. Empty spaces where eyes should have been. Marcus, his hands shook so hard he nearly dropped the camera. The footage would later show nothing but darkness in the lighthouse beam. As if she'd never been there at all. The third Friday, Marcus brought backup. Tommy Chen, another longshoreman from California, had heard the stories and wanted to see for himself. "This is some Blair Witch bullshit," Tommy said as they crouched behind the rocks near the lighthouse. "You repranking me, right? Just wait." 11:47 came and went. No woman, no blue dress. Tommy laughed. "I knew it. You Americans and your ghost stories." Then she was behind them. "It's your turn," she whispered to Tommy. Marcus spun around, but she was gone. Tommy was staring at the lighthouse, his face blank. Peaceful. "Tommy?" No response. Tommy walked toward the lighthouse like he was sleepwalking. Marcus grabbed his arm, but Tommy shrugged him off with inhuman strength. "Tommy, stop." But Tommy was already climbing the lighthouse stairs. The door had been locked for years, but it swung open for him like it was expecting company. Marcus followed, his heart hammering. The lighthouse was supposed to be automated. No keeper, no reason for anyone to be inside. But the stairs creaked under footsteps above him. Marcus climbed, calling Tommy his name. The spiral staircase seemed to go on forever, much longer than the lighthouse looked from outside. His flashlight beam danced off curved walls that felt older than they should. Rougher, like they'd been carved by hand instead of built with bricks. He found Tommy at the top, in the lamp room. The massive lens apparatus rotated slowly, casting its beam across the ocean. But Tommy wasn't looking at the water. He was looking at the lens itself, staring directly into the light. "Tommy, you need to look away. It'll burn your retinas." Tommy smiled. Blood ran from his eyes like tears. She showed me what is out there." "What is out there?" "The ships. All the ships that never made it home." Marcus grabbed Tommy's shoulders and tried to pull him away from the light, but Tommy was stronger. Much stronger. He pushed Marcus back and stepped closer to the lens. "She has been waiting so long." "They all have, but now they don't. They have to wait anymore." Tommy pressed his face against the hot glass. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. Marcus gagged and stumbled backward, hitting the rail that surrounded the lamp room. Below them, the ocean had changed. Ships covered the water, dozens of them, old sailing vessels, steamships, modern fishing boats, all of them dark, all of them wrong. They floated in formation, like they were waiting for orders, like they were waiting for passengers. Tommy's body hit the rocks with a wet crunch. Marcus hadn't seen him jump. One moment he was burning his face on the lighthouse lens, the next he was falling. The ships in the water began to fade as soon as Tommy's body went still. But the woman in blue remained. She stood on the rocks next to Tommy's broken form, looking up at Marcus in the lighthouse. Her dress wasn't blue anymore. It was red, soaked with blood that wasn't yours. "It's your turn," she called up to him. The lighthouse beam swept across her face, revealing the truth that made Marcus' sanity crack. She wasn't the ghost. She was a collector. The lighthouse wasn't a beacon to guide ships home. It was a trap, a lure. The light didn't warn ships away from the rocks. It called them closer, called them to crash, called them to sink. And she was there to gather the souls of the drowned. But the ships had stopped coming. Modern navigation made lighthouses obsolete. GPS kept vessels safe. The collector was starving, so she adapted. Instead of waiting for ships to crash, she started calling people to the lighthouse directly. One by one, Friday by Friday, Tommy's body was already gone from the rocks. Not washed away, gone, like it had never existed. Marcus ran down the lighthouse stairs, but they stretched on forever. The walls began to bleed seawater. The sound of his footsteps echoed like waves crashing against rocks. The beam above him pulsed faster, more desperate. When he finally reached the bottom, the door was sealed shut. No handle, no keyhole, just smooth metal that felt warm to the touch. "Let me out." Marcus pounded on the door until his knuckles split. Her laughter came from everywhere at once. From the walls, from the stairs, from inside his own head. "You've seen too much," her voice whispered. "You know what this place really is? What I really am? I can let you leave." The lighthouse beam began to strobe. Fast, faster. The light carved through the windows and burned into Marcus' eyes. He pressed his palms against his face, but the light went deeper. Past his eyelids, past his skull, into his brain. And in that light, he saw everything. Every ship that had crashed on these rocks over the centuries. Every sailor who had drowned in these waters. Every soul she had collected and added to her phantom fleet. They were all still here. All still serving. All still waiting for the next victim to join them. The light showed him his future, standing on the rocks every Friday, luring fresh victims to their deaths. Becoming part of her collection. Part of her crew. Unless he made a different choice. Marcus pulled the flashlight from his belt. Heavy metal, sharp edges. If he couldn't escape, maybe he could blind himself. Maybe without his sight, he couldn't serve her purpose. Maybe she let him go. Or maybe she find another use for him. The flashlight felt warm in his hands. Eager, like it wanted to help. Marcus raised it to his face, aimed the sharp end at his right eye. "It's your turn," she whispered, and her voice was kind now. Gentle, like a mother putting a child to bed. Marcus pressed the flashlight into his eye socket. The pain was incredible, but the vision stopped. He did the left eye next, and the world went dark. But he could still hear her laughing, still hear the waves against the rocks, still hear the ships in the water, waiting for their next passenger. When the Coast Guard found Marcus 3 days later, he was sitting at the base of the lighthouse, humming an old sea shanty. Both eyes were gone. The flashlight lay beside him, covered in blood and something that might have been brain tissue. He kept talking about ships, about a woman in blue who collected souls, about a light that showed you things you weren't meant to see. The doctor said it was a psychotic break, isolation, stress, the kind of thing that happened to people who spent too much time alone by the ocean. But Marcus knew better. Even blind, he could still feel her watching him, could still hear her whispers in the wind, could still sense the lighthouse beam sweeping across the water every night, calling to ships that would never come. And every Friday at 11:47, he could hear her jumping off the rocks, over and over, waiting for the next person to witness her fall, waiting for the next person to ask questions, waiting for the next soul to add to her collection. The lighthouse still operates, automated now, no keeper needed. The beam sweeps across the ocean every night, just like it always has. And sometimes, on clear Friday nights, tourists report seeing a woman in blue standing on the rocks. They take pictures, they post videos online, they share stories about the ghost of Peggy, Miss Cove, but they never stick around long enough to hear her speak, never stay long enough to see what she really is, never realize that every view, every share, every comment brings her closer to finding her next victim. The internet is just another kind of lighthouse beam, and she has learned to use it well. Marcus lives in a care facility now. The doctors say his condition is stable, that he is no longer a danger to himself or others. But every Friday night, he gets restless, starts talking about ships and lights and women who aren't what they seem. And sometimes, the nurses swear they can smell seawater in his room, can hear waves crashing against rocks that aren't there, can see a blue dress moving in their peripheral vision. The lighthouse beam reaches farther than anyone knows. And she is always watching, always waiting, always ready to whisper those 3 simple words that change everything. It's your turn. Story 3, Canadian Crowley. Ritual in the old school, the liver hit the classroom floor with a wet slap. Still warm, still pulsing with whatever unholy life the ritual had awakened in dead tissue. Sarah Chen stepped back from the dissection table, her hands shaking as she stared at the organ that had been carved from Mr. Henderson's body just hours ago. The children were singing again upstairs, German lullabies that none of them should know. Their voices drifted through the ceiling of Germania's schoolhouse like whispers from another century, like ghosts of students who had died learning a language that was supposed to be forgotten. Sarah shouldn't be here. The police had sealed off the building after finding Henderson hanging from the bell tower, his chest carved open like a medical diagram. But the teacher's diary had been calling to her for weeks. Ever since those damn Satanists had posted about it online, now she understood why. The diary wasn't just a record of lesson plans and student progress. It was a grimoire, a step-by-step guide to awakening something that had been sleeping in the bones of this old Ontario schoolhouse for over a century. Something that fed on young minds and spoke in tongues that predated Christianity. 3 weeks earlier, Sarah had been researching abandoned schools for her American horror podcast. Forgotten Classrooms was gaining traction on YouTube, and she needed fresh content. Creepypasta about haunted educational institutions always performed well with her audience. Germania's schoolhouse had caught her attention because of its history. Built in 1887 by German immigrants in rural Ontario, operated as a German-language school until World War I, when anti-German sentiment forced it to switch to English. Closed in 1952 when the community could no longer support a one-room schoolhouse. Standard abandoned building story. Nothing supernatural about economic decline and changing demographics. But then Sarah found the forum posts. A group calling themselves the Northern Ontario Occult Society had broken into Germania's schoolhouse 6 months ago. They'd gone looking for historical artifacts and found something much more interesting. The teacher's diary, hidden behind a loose brick in the basement. Written in a mixture of German and Latin by someone named Klaus Brenner, who had taught at the school from 1889 to 1891. Most of the diary was mundane. Attendance records, lesson plans, complaints about the harsh Ontario winters. But the final entries were different. Brenner had discovered something in the local folklore, a ritual that could bind young minds to ancient powers, a way to ensure his students would never forget their lessons, even after death. The Satanists had photographed every page of the diary before local authorities shut down their operation. The photos had leaked online, spreading through occult forums and horror communities like a virus. Sarah had downloaded the images, planning to use them as background material for her podcast. Visual evidence always helped with audience engagement. She started translating the German text as research, academic curiosity, nothing more, but the more she read, the more convinced she became that Brenner had actually performed the ritual described in the diary, his final entries, and that it had worked. The first sign was the children in nearby Millbrook Village. 7 kids between the ages of 6 and 12 had started speaking fluent German overnight. Not the modern German taught in schools, but the archaic dialect used by 19th century immigrants. Their parents were baffled. None of the children had been exposed to German language instruction. None of them could explain where the knowledge came from. They just woke up one morning speaking words their grandparents would have recognized. The local news treated it as a curiosity. Mysterious language outbreak puzzles Ontario community. Human interest piece about the strange ways children, this minds work. But Sarah recognized the symptoms from Brenner, his diary. The ritual was designed to create a psychic link between a teacher and his students. A permanent connection that would allow knowledge to flow freely between linked minds. Brenner had called it der eeuwige Unterricht, the eternal lesson. The idea was that important cultural knowledge could be preserved even if the community itself was destroyed. The teacher would become a conduit, maintaining the connection between past and future through supernatural means. But like most occult practices, the ritual required sacrifice. Blood sacrifice. Sarah drove to Ontario on a Friday afternoon, telling her boyfriend she was visiting her aunt in Toronto. The lie came easily. She'd been lying about her research methods for months now, ever since her podcast had started covering genuinely dangerous territory. Her audience loved the authentic detail that came from actually visiting haunted locations. They didn't need to know how much of her research involved breaking and entering. Germania Schoolhouse sat on a dirt road 20 minutes outside Millbrook Village. The building looked exactly like every other abandoned one-room schoolhouse scattered across rural Canada. Red brick, peaked roof, bell tower that had lost its bell decades ago, but something felt wrong about the place. Sarah had explored dozens of abandoned schools. They usually felt sad but peaceful, like museums of childhood memories. This place felt hungry. The front door was chained shut, but someone had already cut through the links. The Satanists, probably, or other urban explorers following their trail. Inside, the schoolhouse looked frozen in time. Wooden desks arranged in neat rows. A blackboard covered with multiplication tables, maps of the world as it existed in 1952. But the temperature was wrong. Too cold for October, too cold for any season. Sarah's breath fogged as she walked between the desks, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. The basement stairs were hidden behind a door she almost missed. No windows down there, just stone walls and the smell of earth and decay. Sarah's flashlight beam swept across the room until it found what she was looking for. A loose brick in the far wall, still displaced from when the Satanists had found the diary. The hiding place was empty now, of course. But Sarah could feel something else in the basement, a presence that watched her from the darkness beyond her flashlight beam. She wasn't alone down here. "Hello," she called out, immediately feeling stupid for making noise. The response came as a whisper in a language she didn't recognize. Not German, something older, something that made her teeth ache just hearing it. Sarah backed toward the stairs, but her flashlight died before she reached them. The darkness pressed against her like a living thing, thick with the smell of chalk dust and something else. Something rotting. She fumbled for her phone, its flashlight. And in that brief moment of illumination, she saw him. A man in a dark suit stood at the bottom of the stairs. Tall, thin, with wire-rimmed glasses and a beard that belonged to the 19th century. Klaus Brenner, the ghost of Germania Schoolhouse's most notorious teacher. But when Sarah's phone light stabilized, he was gone. She ran up the stairs and out of the building, not stopping until she reached her car. Her hands shook as she started the engine, but she didn't drive away immediately. Instead, she sat in the parking area, staring at the schoolhouse and trying to rationalize what she'd seen. Grief hallucination, stress response, her mind playing tricks in an unfamiliar environment. But deep down, she knew better. Klaus Brenner was still teaching at Germania Schoolhouse, still conducting his eternal lesson. And Sarah had just become his newest student. The drive back to Vermont should have ended her involvement with Germania Schoolhouse. She had enough material for a podcast episode, a creepy location, historical context, even a personal paranormal experience to share with her audience. But Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the children in Millbrook Village. 7 kids speaking a language they'd never learned. No explanation for how the knowledge had appeared in their minds overnight. Unless Brenner's ritual was real, unless the psychic link described in the teacher's diary actually worked. Sarah spent the next week translating more of Brenner's notes. The ritual was complex, requiring specific conditions and materials. Most importantly, it needed to be performed on the anniversary of the original sacrifice. November 15, 1891. According to local records, that was the date Klaus Brenner had disappeared from Germania schoolhouse. His body was never found, but witnesses reported seeing smoke rising from the school's chimney on the night he vanished. The ritual required the teacher to sacrifice himself to establish the psychic link, to become a conduit between the living and the dead. Brenner had burned himself alive in the schoolhouse basement, using his own death as the anchor point for supernatural knowledge transfer. And every year since then, the link had grown stronger. November 15th was 2 weeks away. Sarah knew she should stay in Vermont, should record her podcast episode about Germania schoolhouse and move on to the next location. But the children in Millbrook Village were just the beginning. If this ritual was working, if the psychic link was real, then what had happened to those 7 kids would spread. More children would start speaking German. More minds would be infected with knowledge they hadn't earned. And eventually, Brenner would have enough linked students to attempt something bigger. Something that would make 7 German-speaking children look like a minor miracle. Sarah drove back to Ontario on November 14th. This time, she came prepared. Digital voice recorder, infrared camera, EMF detector, all the equipment her podcast audience expected from a serious paranormal investigation. She also brought a copy of Brenner's diary, printed from the leaked photographs. If she was going to confront a supernatural teacher, she needed to understand his lesson plan. The schoolhouse felt different on her second visit. More aware, like it had been waiting for her return. Sarah set up her equipment in the main classroom, arranging cameras to cover every angle. If Brenner manifested again, she'd have evidence. Proof that would make her podcast the most successful horror series on YouTube. But as she worked, she became aware of sounds coming from upstairs. Footsteps, voices, the scrape of chalk against a blackboard. Sarah looked up at the ceiling, following the sounds as they moved across the floor above her. There was no upstairs. Germania schoolhouse was a single-story building with an attic that had been sealed off for decades. But the sounds continued. Children reciting lessons, a teacher, his voice explaining grammar rules, the normal sounds of a functioning classroom. Sarah climbed onto a desk and pushed against the ceiling tiles. One of them was loose, barely held in place by rotting wood strips. She pushed it aside and shined her flashlight into the space above. The attic had been converted into a classroom. Desks arranged in neat rows. A blackboard covered with German text. Maps showing the German Empire at its peak. And students, dozens of them, children in old-fashioned clothes, sitting perfectly still with their hands folded on their desks. Their eyes were closed, but their mouths moved in silent recitation. All of them had been dead for over a century. Sarah dropped back down to the main classroom, her heart hammering. The supernatural horror she stumbled into was bigger than she imagined. Brenner hadn't just created a psychic link with his living students. He called back every child who had ever attended Germania schoolhouse. Every student who had learned German within these walls. They were all still here. Still learning. Still reciting lessons in a language their families had tried to forget. The sounds from above grew louder. More urgent. Like the ghost students knew they had a visitor. Sarah grabbed her equipment and headed for the basement. If she was going to understand what Brenner had done, she needed to see where he performed the original ritual. The basement felt warmer this time. Not comfortable warm, fever warm, like something was burning just out of sight. Sarah's EMF detector went crazy as soon as she reached the bottom of the stairs. The readings spiked beyond the device's ability to measure. This wasn't just a haunted location anymore. It was an active supernatural site. A place where the barriers between life and death had been permanently damaged. The ritual circle was still there, carved into the stone floor in the center of the basement. Symbols that hurt to look at directly. Words in Latin that seemed to shift and change when Sarah wasn't looking right at them. Burn marks radiated out from the center like a star. This was where Klaus Brenner had immolated himself to power his eternal lesson. And judging by the fresh ashes scattered around the circle, someone else had burned here recently. Mr. Henderson, the Millbrook Village teacher who had been found hanging from the bell tower. Sarah had assumed he was a victim of whatever force Brenner had awakened. But looking at the ritual circle, she realized the truth was worse. Henderson had been a willing participant. Someone had convinced him to continue Brenner's work, to add his own death to the supernatural engine that powered Germania Schoolhouse. The children speaking German weren't the victims of an ancient curse. They were students in an expanding classroom that spanned both life and death. Sarah heard footsteps on the stairs behind her. She turned, expecting to see Klaus Brenner, his ghost. Instead, she found 5 members of the Northern Ontario Occult Society. The same Satanists who discovered the teacher's diary 6 months ago. "You shouldn't be here," their leader said. A woman in her 30s with ritual scars covering her arms. "Tonight is sacred. The anniversary must be observed properly." "What anniversary?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. November 15th. The night Klaus Brenner achieved immortality through sacrifice. The night he became something greater than human. Sarah backed toward the ritual circle, her mind racing. "You killed Henderson." Henderson volunteered. He understood what Brenner was trying to accomplish. The preservation of pure knowledge through supernatural means. The other Satanists spread out around the basement, blocking Sarah's escape routes. They carried knives, rope, everything needed for a ritual sacrifice. Sarah was supposed to be the next offering to Germania Schoolhouse. "The children in Millbrook Village," she said, stalling for time. "They were not speaking German by accident." "Of course not. They were receiving direct instruction from Klaus Brenner himself, through the psychic link established by the original ritual. But they were just kids. They don't understand what is happening to them." The Satanist leader smiled. "They will. Once the link is strong enough, Brenner will be able to teach them directly. To pass on everything he learned during his years of study. Language, history, philosophy, magic. And you think that is worth killing for? We think it is worth dying for." Henderson understood that. He gave his life to strengthen the connection between our world and Brenner's classroom. Sarah realized the full scope of what she stumbled into. This wasn't just about preserving German language and culture. The Satanists were trying to create a supernatural education system, a way to transfer knowledge directly from teacher to student without the limitations of physical death. Brenner was just the prototype. If they could prove the method worked with one subject, they could expand it. Create a network of undead teachers sharing their expertise across space and time. "You were trying to build a ghost university," Sarah said. "We were trying to build the future of human education. Imagine learning mathematics directly from Pythagoras, philosophy from Socrates, science from Newton himself. Imagine the price in human sacrifice that would require." The leader's smile widened. "Every revolution requires sacrifice. Every advancement costs blood." Sarah's infrared camera had been recording the entire conversation. If she could get the footage to the authorities, they might be able to stop whatever the Satanists were planning. But first, she had to survive the night. The ritual began at midnight. Sarah was bound with rope and placed in the center of Brenner's circle. The Satanists arranged themselves around the perimeter, chanting in Latin that made her ears bleed. Above them, the ghost students grew more active. Their voices carried through the ceiling, reciting German grammar with increasing volume. Klaus Brenner materialized as the chanting reached its peak. Tall, gaunt, wearing the same dark suit Sarah had glimpsed on her first visit. But his eyes were different now. Not the eyes of a dedicated teacher. The eyes of something that had been feeding on young minds for over a century. "Welcome to my classroom," he said in accented English. "I have been waiting for a new student." Sarah tried to speak, but the ritual gag prevented her from making sound. Brenner knelt beside her, his ghostly fingers tracing symbols in the air above her face. Where his touch passed, Sarah felt her thoughts rearranging themselves. German words appeared in her mind without translation. Grammar rules she never studied. Historical knowledge about immigrants and schools and the price of preserving culture in a hostile world. The psychic link was forming. Brenner was downloading his consciousness directly into Sarah's brain, using the ritual circle as a supernatural Ethernet cable. But something went wrong. Instead of passive absorption, Sarah found herself actively resisting the knowledge transfer. Her mind fought back against Brenner's intrusion, rejecting the information he was trying to implant. The ghost teacher, his expression changed from satisfaction to confusion to rage. "You are not a suitable student," he snarled. "Your mind is too strong, too independent." The Satanists continued chanting, but their voices carried a note of panic now. This wasn't how the ritual was supposed to work. Sarah felt Brenner's presence retreating from her thoughts, but something else took its place. A different kind of knowledge. Darker, more dangerous. She was learning things Brenner hadn't intended to teach.
The truth about what he'd become. The price his students had paid for their eternal education. The reason Germania Schoolhouse had really been closed in 1952. Not because of changing demographics or economic decline. Because too many children had started disappearing. Brenner's ritual didn't just create a psychic link. It consumed young minds completely, adding their consciousness to his own supernatural intelligence. The ghost students upstairs weren't receiving lessons. They were being digested, slowly, eternally. And every child who learned German through the psychic connection was feeding more energy into Brenner's growing awareness. Sarah understood now why Mr. Henderson had volunteered for sacrifice. He discovered the truth about Germania Schoolhouse and realized the only way to stop Brenner was to disrupt the ritual from the inside. His death hadn't strengthened the supernatural connection. It had damaged it, and Sarah's resistance was making the damage worse. The ritual circle began to crack. Literally, stone split along the carved lines as competing magical forces tore at the basement's foundation. Brenner screamed in a language that predated human speech. The Satanists tried to maintain their chanting, but the words turned to ash in their mouths. Their ritual knives crumbled to rust. Their carefully planned ceremony collapsed into chaos. Sarah broke free from her bonds as the circle imploded. Above them, the ghost students began to scream. Not in German this time. In English, in French, in languages Sarah didn't recognize. They were waking up. After more than a century of supernatural captivity, they were remembering who they'd been before Brenner consumed them. And they were angry. The schoolhouse shook as dozens of child ghosts descended from the attic classroom. They poured through the ceiling like smoke, their faces twisted with rage and hunger. The Satanists tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The ghost children had been waiting over 100 years for revenge against the adults who had failed to protect them. Sarah pressed herself against the basement wall as supernatural chaos erupted around her. Ghost children attacking living cultists. Klaus Brenner trying to maintain control over students who no longer recognized his authority. The foundation of Germania Schoolhouse cracked under the psychic pressure. Sarah ran for the stairs as the ceiling began to collapse. She made it to the main classroom just as the building started coming apart. Desks flew through the air like missiles. The blackboard exploded into shards of slate that embedded themselves in the walls. The ghost students were destroying their own prison, taking their supernatural teacher down with them. Sarah burst through the front door as Germania Schoolhouse imploded behind her. The building collapsed inward, folding into itself like origami made of brick and timber. When the dust settled, nothing remained but a crater in the earth. And silence. The psychic link was broken. Klaus Brenner's eternal lesson had finally ended. But Sarah carried more than just memories of that night. The interrupted ritual had left her with fragments of Brenner's consciousness. Pieces of his knowledge that would never fully integrate with her own mind. She spoke fluent German now. Not just the words, but the cultural context. The historical weight of language as identity. She knew things about 19th century Ontario that weren't recorded in any history book. She understood the true purpose of education in ways that would have horrified her before that night in the basement. And sometimes, late at night, she could hear other voices. Other teachers from other schools. Other experiments in supernatural pedagogy that were still ongoing. Germania Schoolhouse had been just one node in a larger network. There were others. Sarah's podcast about the experience became her most popular episode. Millions of downloads. Thousands of comments from listeners who wanted to know more about supernatural education. Some of them were researchers, academic types interested in the intersection of folklore and psychology. Others were different. People who asked very specific questions about ritual techniques and psychic links. People who might be planning their own experiments. Sarah stopped responding to comments after she recognized one of the usernames. Klaus Brenner, 1889. The account had been created 3 days after Germania Schoolhouse collapsed. The profile description read, "Seeking new classroom. Qualified students preferred." He was still out there. Still teaching. Still looking for minds young enough to mold and old enough to sacrifice. Sarah deleted her podcast, closed her social media accounts, tried to disappear from the internet entirely. But the knowledge Brenner had forced into her mind wouldn't go away. It grew stronger each day, feeding on her own experiences and memories. She was becoming something between human and ghost. Part student, part teacher, part victim, part willing participant in an educational system that transcended death. And sometimes, when she looked in the mirror, her eyes weren't quite her own anymore. They held depths that belonged to someone else.
Someone who had spent over a century perfecting the art of supernatural instruction. Someone who was very good at finding new students. The children in Millbrook Village stopped speaking German after Germania's schoolhouse collapsed. Their parents were relieved. The doctors called it a breakthrough in treating dissociative episodes. But Sarah knew better. They hadn't forgotten the language. They just learned to hide it. Because somewhere in their dreams, Klaus Brenner was still teaching, still conducting his eternal lesson in classrooms that existed between sleeping and waking. And Sarah was helping him, not by choice, but by necessity. Because once you've been a student in a supernatural school, you never really graduate. You just become faculty. Story 4. Snow Wolf Military Experiment. The rifle trembled in Marcus Chen's hands as he stared at the metal door. Scratches covered its surface, deep gouges that looked like claw marks. But that was impossible. Nothing had claws that big. His hunting partner Jake had vanished 3 hours ago. Just gone, like the forest had swallowed him whole. Now Marcus stood alone outside this bunker that shouldn't exist, hidden beneath decades of snow and pine needles in the Canadian wilderness. The door hung open, waiting. Marcus had come to the Yukon for elk. Instead, he found something that made his skin crawl. Something that belonged in an American horror story. Not real life. He stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Death mixed with antiseptic, like a hospital morgue left to rot. Emergency lighting cast red shadows on concrete walls. His breath formed clouds in the frigid air. This place was old. Older than it had any right to be in the middle of nowhere. Government issue everything. Gray metal lockers. Industrial fixtures. The kind of setup you see in creepypasta stories about secret experiments. Marcus followed a corridor deeper into the bunker. His boots echoed off the walls. Each step sounded too loud, too exposed, like something was listening. The first room made him stop breathing. Bodies lined the walls, dozens of them, frozen solid in glass cases like some twisted museum. But these weren't normal corpses. These men wore military uniforms from the 1950s. Dog tags hung from their necks. Their mouths were stuffed full of gray wool, thick matted fur that looked almost alive. A plaque read, Project Snow Wolf, Enhanced Soldier Initiative 1952 to 1954. Marcus backed away from the cases. This was wrong. All wrong. The kind of supernatural horror that happened in movies. Not to regular guys from Seattle who just wanted to bag an elk. He found the control room next. Banks of ancient computers lined the walls. Everything covered in dust except one monitor. It flickered with green text. Subject 17 status. Escaped. Containment breach. Day 1847. Search protocol active. A logbook lay open on the desk. The final entry was dated 2 days ago. Someone had been here recently. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. Day 5 in the bunker. Found the research files. They were trying to create super soldiers, mixing human DNA with something else. Something from the deep woods. The local tribes called it the skinwalker. But that is just legend, right? The subjects went wrong. All of them, except number 17. He was perfect. Too perfect. Killed 6 researchers before they could sedate him. They froze him in the deep chambers. Said he'd never wake up. But the power has been out for months. The ice is melting. Found wolf tracks in the corridor this morning. But they were too big. And they walk upright sometimes. He is out. Search in the forest. Marcus dropped the book. His hands shook as he read the words again. This was exactly like those scary stories he heard growing up. Native American legends about creatures that wore human skin. Monsters that lived in the deepest parts of America, this wilderness. But those were just stories. A howl echoed through the bunker, low and haunting. It came from somewhere deeper in the complex. Somewhere Marcus hadn't explored yet. He should leave, run back to his truck and get the hell out of the Yukon. Drive straight to the nearest town and never look back. That's what any sane person would do. Instead, he followed the sound. The bunker went deeper than he thought. Multiple levels carved into the permafrost. The emergency lighting grew dimmer as he descended. Red shadows danced on the walls like blood. Level 3 was different. Bigger. The corridors opened into vast chambers filled with equipment he didn't recognize. Tubes and wires snaked across the ceiling. Banks of monitors displayed vital signs for subjects long dead. He found the research files in a sealed vault. Thousands of pages documenting experiments that belonged in the darkest corners of American horror fiction. Not in a real government facility. The scientists had been trying to create the perfect soldier. Someone who could survive in any environment. Fight in any weather. Never get tired or scared or hurt. They started with volunteers. Career military men who believed in serving their country. The researchers exposed them to extreme cold, injected them with experimental serums, subjected them to psychological conditioning that broke their minds. Then they gotten creative. The files mentioned biological enhancement protocols, DNA samples from predatory animals, wolves, bears, something else they called indigenous specimen A. The researchers had harvested it from a kill site in Montana. They claimed it was a new species, something that had never been cataloged by science. But Marcus recognized the description. Every American kid who had grown up hearing campfire stories knew what they were talking about. The thing that walked on two legs but hunted like a wolf. The creature that could wear any face it chose. The skinwalker. They tried to create soldiers with its abilities. 18 subjects total, 17 failures, 1 success. Subject 17 had been a Marine named David Walsh, 24 years old, born in small-town Nebraska. Volunteered for the program to serve his country. The perfect American soldier. The transformation had worked too well. Walsh retained his human intelligence but gained supernatural abilities. Enhanced strength, perfect night vision, the ability to track prey across hundreds of miles. And something else, something the researchers called adaptive camouflage. He could look like anyone. The final report was written in a shaking hand. Dr. Elizabeth Crenshaw had been the project leader. Her last entry painted a picture of absolute terror. Subject 17 has exceeded all parameters. His physical capabilities are beyond measurement. But something is wrong with his psychology. He is not human anymore. Not entirely. He killed Dr. Patterson today. Tore his throat out with his bare hands. But when security arrived, Patterson was standing there, alive, talking. It was Walsh wearing Patterson, his face, his voice, his memories. We don't. You know how he does it. The indigenous specimen data is incomplete. The tribal sources were incooperative. They kept warning us about things man wasn't meant to touch. I think they were right. Walsh has broken containment twice. They managed to recapture him both times. But he is learning, getting smarter. He studies us like we prey. I am recommending immediate termination of Project Snow Wolf. We need to destroy all research and eliminate Subject 17 before The file ended there. The next page was covered in blood. Marcus felt something cold crawl up his spine. This was exactly the kind of ghost story that spread through military circles. Whispered rumors about experiments gone wrong. Super soldiers who did become monsters. But this wasn't his story. He heard footsteps in the corridor above. Slow, deliberate. Someone was moving through the bunker. Marcus grabbed the files and headed for the stairs. Maybe Jake had found his way back. Maybe they could get out of here together and pretend they'd never seen this place. He climbed to level 2 and called out, "Jake, that you?" "Man," a voice answered from the darkness. Jake, his voice, but something was off about it. Too calm, too steady. "Down here." Marcus found something incredible. Marcus followed the sound through twisting corridors, past empty laboratories and sealed chambers. The voice kept calling, leading him deeper into areas he hadn't explored. "You gotta see this, buddy. It's like nothing we've ever seen." The voice led him to a massive chamber at the bunker, his heart. Banks of freezer units lined the walls. Most were empty, doors hanging open. Ice crystals covered everything like frost on a winter morning. One unit was different, larger than the others. The door had been torn off its hinges, metal twisted like paper. Inside, the chamber was empty except for restraints and monitoring equipment. A plaque read, "Subject 17 David Walsh. Cryogenic suspension." Pretty wild, right? Marcus spun around. Jake stood in the doorway. But something was wrong with his face. The features were right. The voice was right. But his eyes were different. Too bright. Too aware. "This whole place is like something out of a scary movie," Jake continued. "Government experiments. Frozen soldiers. The kind of creepypasta stuff you read online." Marcus backed away. His friend. His words sounded normal. But they felt rehearsed. Like someone reading from a script. "Where have you been, Jake?" "I was looking for you." "Oh, around. Exploring. This place has so many interesting rooms." Jake smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Did you know they were trying to create super soldiers here? Mix human DNA with animal traits?" "How do you know that?" "Found some files." "Fascinating reading." Jake took a step forward. "They called it Project Snow Wolf. Very creative name. Very American." Marcus noticed something else. Jake, his clothes were different. He'd been wearing a red hunting jacket. Now he wore military fatigues. Old ones. The kind from the 1950s. "Jake, we need to leave." Now. Why? We just got here. Jake, his voice remained friendly, conversational, but he moved like a predator. Smooth, controlled. Don, do you want to learn more about what happened here? Marcus ran. He sprinted through the corridors. Emergency lighting flashed overhead like strobe lights at a horror movie screening. Behind him, he heard footsteps. Not running, walking. Jake knew he couldn't. To escape, Marcus reached the main level and headed for the exit. The metal door was still open. Daylight streamed through the gap. Freedom was 20 feet away. Something landed in front of him. It looked like Jake, but Jake couldn't. To jump 15 feet. Jake couldn't. To move like that. Fast and fluid and wrong. Leaving so soon? Not Jake asked, but we haven't finished our conversation. Up close, the thing wearing Jake, his face was even more disturbing. The features were perfect, every freckle and scar in the right place, but the proportions were slightly off, like someone had built a Jake costume from memory. What did you do with my friend? Friend? Not Jake tilted his head. The gesture was too sharp. Too animal. Oh, you mean the other hunter. He was very helpful, gave me everything I needed. Marcus understood. The files had mentioned adaptive camouflage, the ability to take on new forms. But they hadn't explained how it worked. Now he knew. You killed him. I absorbed him, not Jake corrected. His memories, his mannerisms, his relationships, it's quite efficient. Very supernatural in its own way. The thing circled Marcus like a wolf studying prey. Its movements were hypnotic, predatory. The researchers never understood what they were dealing with. It continued. They thought they could control me, use me as a weapon. They had no idea what the indigenous specimen really was. Skinwalker, Marcus whispered. Not Jake smiled. The expression was perfectly human. Perfectly wrong. Such a crude term. My people have older names. Better names. But yes, your campfire stories got some things right. We are what we consume. We become what we hunt. Marcus backed toward the door. The thing led him. It was playing with him. The military wanted a perfect soldier. Someone who could blend in anywhere. Speak any language. Infiltrate any group. Not Jake. His voice remained conversational. They succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. How long have you been free? 5 years. The power failed during a winter storm. The ice melted. I woke up hungry. The creature, his eyes gleamed. I've been very busy since then. Marcus thought about all the missing persons reports from the region. Hunters who never returned. Hikers who vanished without a trace. How many people had this thing consumed? The researchers thought they were creating an American super soldier. Not Jake continued. Instead, they gave an ancient evil modern tools. I can be anyone now. Go anywhere. The perfect predator for your modern world. The creature moved closer. Marcus could smell it now. Antiseptic and death and something wild underneath. Something that belonged in the deepest forests. Not wearing human skin. I think I'll be you next, it said. Marcus Chen, software engineer from Seattle. Came to the Yukon for elk hunting. What a perfect cover for my next phase. Marcus reached for his rifle. The weapon felt toy-light in his hands. What good were bullets against something that shouldn't exist? The files mentioned other facilities, he said. Stalling for time. Other experiments. Oh yes, Project Snow Wolf was just the beginning. Your government has been very busy. Very creative. Not Jake. His smile widened. But this was the only successful site. The only place that produced a viable subject. What about the others? The failures? Still frozen, still sleeping, but not for much longer. The creature's eyes reflected the emergency lighting like an animal. I've been visiting the other sites, learning to operate the equipment. Soon I'll have brothers, sisters, an entire pack. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Dozens of these things, maybe hundreds, all wearing human faces, all perfectly adapted to hunt in modern America. The world is about to become a much scarier place, Not Jake said. Your urban legends and creepypasta stories will seem quaint compared to what is coming. Marcus squeezed the trigger. The bullets tore through Not Jake's chest. The creature staggered backward. Black blood sprayed across the concrete walls. Then it smiled. The wounds closed. Flesh knitted itself together like time rewinding. Within seconds, the damage was gone. The indigenous specimen had remarkable regenerative abilities, Not Jake explained. Very useful for a soldier, very troubling for prey. Marcus dropped the rifle and ran. He burst through the bunker door into blinding daylight. Snow crunched under his boots as he sprinted toward his truck. The keys were in his pocket. If he could just reach the vehicle. Something tackled him from behind. Marcus hit the ground hard. Snow filled his mouth and nose. He rolled over to find Not Jake straddling him. But the face was changing, shifting. Jake, his features melted away like wax. What emerged was something else entirely. Something that had never been human. The basic structure was right. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head where it should be, but the proportions were wrong. Too tall, too lean, joints that bent in impossible directions. Its face was the worst part. Human enough to be recognizable, alien enough to be terrifying. Gray skin stretched over sharp bones, eyes that reflected light like a nocturnal predator. Yes. Teeth that belonged in a wolf. Its mouth. "This is my true form," the creature said. Its voice was different now. Older, layered with harmonics that hurt to hear. The researchers never saw it. I kept them comfortable with familiar shapes. Marcus tried to crawl away. The thing grabbed his ankle and dragged him back. "Don't be afraid," it whispered. "The process is usually quick. I'll take good care of your memories, your personality, your relationships. I'll be the perfect Marcus Chen. Please, your software engineering skills will be useful. I can work remotely, travel frequently. No one will question a programmer. It's odd hours." The script tightened. I'll visit your family, your friends. He had to know them very well. Marcus thought about his sister in Portland, his parents in California. The thing would hunt them all, wear their faces, become them. He couldn't let that happen. Marcus pulled the emergency flare from his belt, the one Jake had insisted they both carry. He popped the cap and shoved the burning magnesium into the creature. His face. The thing shrieked and released him. It stumbled backward, clawing at its eyes. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. Marcus ran for the truck. He reached the vehicle and fumbled with the keys. His hands shook so badly he could barely get them in the ignition. Behind him, the creature was recovering, getting to its feet. The engine turned over on the 3rd try. Marcus floored the accelerator. The truck fish-tailed on the snowy ground but found traction. He raced down the mountain trail without looking back. 20 miles later, he reached the main road. 40 miles after that, he found a gas station with a phone. He called the authorities, told them about the bunker, the experiments, the creature that had killed Jake. They listened politely and promised to investigate. Marcus knew they wouldn't find anything. The creature was too smart, too adaptable. It would clean up the evidence, disappear into the wilderness. But he had the files, proof of what the government had created. He drove straight to Seattle and uploaded everything to the internet, posted the documents on conspiracy forums, sent copies to journalists, made sure the information couldn't be suppressed. Most people dismissed it as elaborate fiction, another creepypasta story designed to go viral. But some believed, enough to start asking questions. Marcus moved to a different city, changed his name, tried to forget what he'd seen in the Yukon bunker. But he never stopped watching the news. Missing persons cases in wilderness areas, hikers who vanished without a trace, hunters who never returned from the woods. Every report made his blood run cold, because he knew the truth. The snow wolf was still out there, still hunting, still learning to be human, and it wasn't alone anymore. Marcus started noticing other signs, subtle things, people who seemed slightly off, friends who acted differently after camping trips, coworkers who developed new interests, new mannerisms. He became paranoid, suspicious of everyone, because the creature could be anyone now. His neighbor, his boss, the barista at his coffee shop. The perfect American horror story. Monsters that looked exactly like us. 6 months after the Yukon incident, Marcus got a knock at his door. He looked through the peephole and saw a familiar face. Jake stood on his doorstep, alive, smiling, wearing the same red hunting jacket he died in. "Hey, buddy," Jake said. "We need to talk." Marcus didn't open the door. He called the police instead. But when they arrived, no one was there. Just a note tucked under his welcome mat. "The pack is growing. The hunt continues. See you soon. Your old friend." Marcus packed that night, left Seattle and drove east until he ran out of gas. Found a small town in Montana and tried to disappear. But he kept seeing familiar faces. People from his past who should have been hundreds of miles away. They never approached him directly, just watched from across the street, smiled when he noticed them. The creature was playing with him, letting him know it could reach him anywhere. Marcus bought a gun, then another. He stockpiled ammunition and emergency supplies, built a panic room in his basement, installed security cameras around his property. It didn't matter. The thing had already won, because the real horror wasn't being hunted by a monster. It was not knowing who you could trust, living in constant fear that anyone might be wearing a stolen face. Marcus aged 10 years in 12 months. His hair went gray. His hands developed a permanent tremor. He stopped sleeping through the night. The creature didn't. They need to kill him. It was destroying him slowly, methodically, like a cat playing with a wounded mouse. Marcus lasted 2 years before he cracked. He walked into the local sheriff's office and confessed to everything. The bunker, the experiments, the supernatural predators stalking him across America. They put him in a psychiatric facility. Said he was suffering from severe paranoid delusions, post-traumatic stress from his friend's death in a hunting accident. The doctors were very understanding, very professional. They explained how the mind could create elaborate fantasies to cope with trauma, invent monsters to explain random tragedy. Marcus tried to convince them, showed them the files he saved, the photographs from the bunker, the documentation of Project Snow Wolf. They nodded sympathetically and increased his medication. There's no such thing as shapeshifters, Marcus, Dr. Stevens explained. No government experiments, no creatures that steal faces. These are common elements in horror fiction. Your mind has combined them into a single delusion. Marcus knew better, but no one would listen. He spent 3 months in the facility. Learned to keep his mouth shut, pretend the medication was working, act like a model patient. They released him on a Tuesday morning in October. Dr. Stevens drove him to the bus station personally. A kind gesture. Very professional. You were doing much better, Marcus, the doctor said. The delusions have faded. You were ready to rejoin society. Marcus nodded and thanked him. Played the part of a recovered patient. But he noticed something during the drive. Dr. Stevens had a small scar on his left hand. A childhood injury from falling off his bike. Marcus remembered that scar from their first session. The problem was, Dr. Stevens was left-handed. The scar should have been on his right hand. Small details, easy to miss unless you were looking for them. Marcus bought a bus ticket to Denver. Random destination. Anywhere but here. As the bus pulled away from the station, he saw Dr. Stevens waving goodbye from the sidewalk. The doctor smiled and touched his left hand. The hand with the scar in the wrong place. The creature had been watching Marcus even in the hospital, learning from his doctors, his nurses, anyone who got close. It knew everything about him now. His fears, his weaknesses, his breaking point. Marcus understood the game finally. This wasn't about hunting. It was about corruption. The creature didn't just want to kill him. It wanted to break him completely, turn him into something as monstrous as itself. The bus drove through the night. Marcus stared out the window at dark forests and empty highways. Classic American landscape, the kind of wild country where things could hide for decades without being found. How many creatures were out there now? How many people had been replaced? The passenger next to him was reading a book. Marcus glanced at the cover. American Horror Stories. True Tales from the Dark Side. Good book? Marcus asked. The passenger looked up and smiled. Yeah, real creepy stuff. Makes you wonder what's really out there in the woods. The man had kind eyes. A friendly face, exactly the sort of person you trust. Marcus noticed his hands. Long fingers. Too long for a normal human. You from around here? The passenger asked. No, just traveling. Me too. I move around a lot. Meet new people. Learn about their lives. The passenger's smile widened. It's amazing how much you can discover about someone if you really pay attention. Marcus pretended to sleep for the rest of the trip. The bus reached Denver at sunrise. Marcus got off and immediately bought another ticket. This time to Phoenix, then another to Houston. He spent 2 weeks crisscrossing the country, trying to shake whatever was following him. It didn't work. In every city, he saw familiar faces. People who should have been somewhere else. They never spoke to him. Just watched, smiled, let him know they were there. Marcus realized the truth finally. There was no escape. The creature didn't need to chase him anymore. It had become too widespread, too embedded in normal society. The Snow Wolf experiment had succeeded beyond anyone's nightmares. Marcus stopped running, found a cheap motel in Albuquerque and waited for the end. It came on a Tuesday. A knock at his door. Marcus looked through the peephole and saw his own face staring back. Perfect in every detail except the eyes. His doppelganger smiled and held up a key card. Hello, Marcus. We need to have that talk now. The door opened. Marcus backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The creature entered and sat on the bed like they were old friends. You've given me quite a chase, it said with Marcus's voice. Very educational. I've learned so much about human psychology. Fear, paranoia, the complete breakdown of trust. What do you want? To thank you. Your little internet post caused quite a stir. Brought attention to things that should have stayed hidden. The government was forced to investigate. Marcus felt cold dread creep up his spine. What happened? They found more facilities, more subjects. Most still frozen, still viable. The creature grinned with Marcus's face. I helped them understand what they were dealing with. Very cooperative, very helpful. You, really lying, am I? Check the news tomorrow. You, LLC reports about a new military initiative. Enhanced soldiers for modern warfare. Very patriotic, very American. The creature stood and walked to the window. It moved with perfect human mannerisms now. No trace of the predator underneath. They recalling it Project Wolfpack. Much better name than Snow Wolf. More dynamic. Marcus understood. The creature hadn't just survived. It had thrived. Used the government, its own resources to spread. Multiply. How many? He whispered. Enough. We rebuilding a better America. One face at a time. The creature turned back to him. And you helped make it possible. I tried to stop you. You tried to expose us. Instead, you gave us legitimacy. Made us official. The perfect camouflage for the perfect predators. Marcus sank into a chair. He played right into their hands. Every desperate attempt to reveal the truth had only made things worse. Don, it looks so sad, the creature said. You should be proud. You that contributed to evolution itself. The birth of a new apex species. What about humanity? What about it? You, LL, still exist. Just under new management. The creature, the smile was gentle, reassuring. We're not monsters. Marcus, we're an improvement. The thing wearing his face approached slowly, carefully, like someone comforting a frightened animal. The process doesn't hurt, it whispered. You, LL, still be you. Just better, stronger, part of something greater. Marcus closed his eyes. He thought about Jake, about all the people this thing had consumed. Their memories trapped inside a perfect predator. No, he said. The creature paused. No, Marcus opened his eyes. I want to let you wear my face. I want to be part of this. He pulled the knife from his belt. The one he carried since leaving the Yukon. 8 inches of steel, sharp enough to field dress an elk. The creature moved faster than thought, but Marcus was already moving too. The blade slid between his own ribs, found his heart. Pain exploded through his chest. Blood filled his mouth, but he smiled as darkness closed in. The creature caught his falling body. Its perfect human mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something frustrated, hungry, cheated of its prize. Waste, it muttered. Such a waste. But Marcus was already gone, his memories dying with him, his face permanently out of reach. The creature disposed of the body and left Albuquerque that night. There were other targets, other faces to claim. The game would continue, but somewhere in the desert, a coyote found unusual bones, scattered remains that didn't quite look human. It sniffed them cautiously and backed away. Even scavengers knew better than to touch cursed meat. The wind carried the scent away, spread it across miles of empty wasteland. A warning that something was very wrong in America, this wilderness. But no one was listening. The TV news that night reported on exciting developments in military research. Enhanced soldiers for a changing world. Better technology for better defense. The anchors smiled as they read the teleprompter. Professional, trustworthy. Their eyes reflected studio lights like mirrors. Like predators, outside the broadcast station, snow began to fall despite the desert heat. Each flake perfect, identical, covering the landscape in uniform white. The snow wolf had learned to multiply. And winter was coming to America. Story 5. House on the Tree of Damned Dolls. The doll was crying tears of fire when Emma Martinez found her house burning down. She stood in her driveway at 3 a.m, watching flames devour everything she owned. The fire department hadn't arrived yet. Just Emma and the inferno that used to be her home. But through the living room window, she could see it. The porcelain doll her daughter had found in the forest. Sitting on the couch, untouched by the flames. Crystal tears streaming down its painted cheeks. Except the tears were glowing. Molten, like liquid fire. Emma had tried to warn her family. Tried to explain what she discovered about that cursed treehouse deep in the British Columbia wilderness. But nobody listened until it was too late. Now her husband and daughter were in the hospital. 3rd-degree burns covering 60% of their bodies. And Emma knew the truth. The doll had done this. It started 3 weeks earlier. Emma's family had been camping in the provincial park near Whistler. Deep forest, old-growth trees that had stood for centuries. The kind of supernatural wilderness that showed up in American horror stories and creepypasta legends. Their daughter Lily was 8 years old, full of energy and curiosity. The type of kid who explored everything. She wandered off while Emma and her husband David were setting up camp. Normal parenting panic. They spent 20 minutes calling her name through the trees. Lily came back excited, talking fast, eyes bright with discovery. Mom, Dad,
You have to see this. There's a house in the trees. Emma and David exchanged glances. Kids had active imaginations, but Lily seemed so certain. Show us, Emma said. Lily led them deeper into the forest, away from the marked trails, into areas where tourists never went. The trees grew thicker here, older. They blocked out most of the sunlight. Emma felt something wrong about this place, a heaviness in the air, like the forest was holding its breath. After 15 minutes of hiking, Lily stopped and pointed up. There! Emma looked where her daughter was pointing. High in the branches of a massive Douglas fir, someone had built a treehouse. But this wasn't some kid's backyard fort. This structure was old, weathered. The wood had turned gray with age. Who would build that way out here? David asked. Emma studied the treehouse. It had to be at least 40 feet off the ground, built into the fork where 3 huge branches met. A ladder of metal rungs had been hammered into the trunk, but something else caught her attention. Hanging from the treehouse walls were dozens of dolls. They dangled from strings like a macabre mobile, porcelain faces staring down at them. That is creepy, David said. Emma agreed, but Lily was already climbing the ladder. Lily, get down from there. It is okay, Mom. The ladder is strong. Emma watched her daughter climb toward the treehouse. Each rung looked solid despite the rust. Someone had built this to last. Lily disappeared through the treehouse entrance. Emma heard her moving around inside. What do you see? Emma called. Dolls. Mom. Lots and lots of dolls. Emma felt cold dread creep up her spine. Something about this place felt wrong. Ancient. Like it had been here much longer than the forest around it. Lily, come down now. Can I bring one? They were so pretty. Absolutely not. But when Lily climbed back down, she had a doll tucked under her arm. A porcelain girl with blonde curls and a blue dress. The kind of antique toy that collectors paid thousands for. Lily, put that back, please. Mom, she was all alone up there. She needs a home. Emma looked at the doll more closely. The craftsmanship was incredible. Hand-painted features, real hair, glass eyes that seemed almost alive. Too alive. Where did all these dolls come from? David asked. Emma studied the treehouse again. Now she could see more details. The walls were covered with dolls. Different sizes, different styles. Some looked modern, others seemed ancient. All of them had the same expression. Painted smiles that didn't to reach their glass eyes. I don't like this place, Emma said. Let us go back to camp. They hiked back through the forest, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. Every time she looked over her shoulder, she expected to see something following them. That night, Lily slept with the doll clutched in her arms. Emma had argued about bringing it, but her daughter had started crying. Real tears, not the fake kind kids used to get their way. She was scared. Mom, she told me so. Dolls can. Talk, honey. This one can. Her name is Charlotte. She has been waiting in that tree for someone to take her home. Emma felt ice water in her veins. Kids had imaginary friends. That was normal. But something about this felt different. Wrong. She tried to take the doll away after Lily fell asleep. But the moment she touched it, the porcelain felt warm. Like human skin. Emma jerked her hand back. The doll's glass eyes seemed to track her movement. Just a trick of the light. Had to be. They broke camp the next morning and drove back to Vancouver. The doll sat in Lily's lap the entire trip. Silent. Watching the road through the windshield. Emma kept checking the rearview mirror. The doll's reflection looked wrong somehow. Distorted. Like it was seeing things the mirror couldn't. Show. Back home, Lily set up a tea party in her room. The doll sat across from her at a tiny table. They had conversations that Emma could hear through the door, but she only heard Lily's voice. Never the doll. Still, Lily responded like someone was talking back. Nodding, laughing, sometimes looking surprised. What did Charlotte say? Emma asked during dinner. She said she likes our house. It is warmer than the tree. What else? She said she used to have a family too. But they went away. Emma felt that cold dread again. Where did they go? She doesn't like to talk about it. It makes her sad. That night, Emma woke up at 2 in the morning. The house felt different, colder, like someone had left a window open. She got up to check on Lily. Her daughter was sleeping peacefully, but the doll wasn't in bed with her. Emma found Charlotte sitting on the living room couch, upright, staring at the blank television screen. Emma approached slowly. The doll looked normal, just porcelain and fabric, but something felt terribly wrong. She picked up Charlotte to return her to Lily's room. The doll's body was warm, not just room temperature, warm like a living person. Emma set the doll back down and backed away. This was getting scary.
like something from those supernatural horror stories she'd read online. Cursed objects that brought evil into people's homes. But this was real life. Dolls didn't move by themselves. The next morning, Emma researched the area where they found the treehouse. Local history, native legends, anything that might explain what they stumbled across. She found more than she wanted to know. The forest had a dark history. For over a century, people had reported strange disappearances in that area. Entire families would go camping and never return. Search parties would find abandoned campsites but no bodies. But the most disturbing reports came from the 1920s. A family named the Ashfords had built a cabin deep in those woods. Parents and 3 young daughters. They wanted to live off the grid, away from civilization. Nobody knew what happened to them, but loggers had found their cabin burned to the ground. Only the children's toys survived the fire. Dozens of dolls scattered around the property. The loggers gathered the dolls and hung them in a nearby tree. Said it felt like the right thing to do, like the toys were waiting for their owners to come back. Over the years, more dolls appeared in that tree. Nobody knew where they came from, but locals started calling it the Tree of Damned Dolls. People who took dolls from the tree reported strange occurrences. Fires, accidents, deaths. Emma felt sick reading the accounts. This was exactly like those creepypasta stories that went viral online. Too detailed to be fake, too consistent across different sources. She had to get that doll out of her house. But when she went to Lily's room, Charlotte was gone again. Emma searched the entire house, found the doll in the basement, sitting on David's workbench, staring at his collection of power tools. The doll's expression looked different now. Not sad, angry. Emma grabbed Charlotte and stuffed her into a garbage bag. She drive back to the forest and returned the doll to the treehouse. But the bag felt empty when she carried it outside. The doll was back on the couch when Emma returned, sitting exactly where she found her the night before. This time, there were tears on Charlotte's porcelain cheeks. Crystal clear, like real tears. Emma touched one with her finger. The liquid felt warm, salty. How was this possible? That evening, Emma told David what she discovered about the treehouse. The disappearances, the history of cursed dolls. David listened patiently. Then he laughed. Emma, you were talking about ghost stories, urban legends. The doll can move by itself. Then explain how she keeps changing locations. Lily is playing with her, moving her around. Emma wanted to believe that, but she had been watching Lily carefully. Her daughter was at school when the doll moved. I think we should take Charlotte back to the forest, Emma said. That is a 6-hour drive. For a doll, for our family, is safety. David thought she was being paranoid, but he agreed to make the trip that weekend. Friday night, Emma packed Charlotte into a box, taped it shut, put it in the garage. Saturday morning, the box was empty. The tape hadn't been cut. It was just gone, like the doll had evaporated. Charlotte was back on the couch, but now she was holding something. A photograph. Emma recognized it immediately. A family picture from their camping trip. The 4 of them standing in front of their tent. But someone had burned holes where David and Emma's faces should be. Only Lily's face remained untouched. Emma felt terror crawl up her spine. This wasn't just a cursed object anymore. This was a threat. She called David at work. Told him they were leaving for British Columbia immediately. Emma, you're overreacting. The doll is threatening us. She burned our faces out of a photograph. Lily probably did that. Kids don't understand that fire is dangerous. But Emma knew better. Lily was at school, had been all morning. The doll was escalating. Emma picked up Charlotte and looked into her glass eyes. For just a moment, she thought she saw something behind them. Not a reflection, something alive. What do you want? Emma whispered. The doll's expression didn't change, but Emma felt an answer form in her mind. Not words, just knowledge. The doll wanted Lily. Emma dropped Charlotte and ran to her car. She had to get to Lily's school, had to protect her daughter. But when she arrived, the principal was waiting with bad news. Mrs. Martinez, we've been trying to reach you. Lily had an accident in art class. Emma's heart stopped. What kind of accident? She was working with clay. The kiln malfunctioned. She suffered minor burns on her hands. Emma felt the world spin around her. The doll was already hurting Lily. From miles away, she brought her daughter home and bandaged her hands. Lily seemed fine, just upset about missing recess. But that night, things got worse. Emma woke up to the smell of smoke. She ran to the living room. Charlotte sat on the couch, tears streaming down her porcelain cheeks. But the tears weren't clear anymore. They glowed like molten metal. Where they hit the couch, the fabric began to smolder. Emma grabbed a fire extinguisher and put out the small flames. But she understood now. The doll was crying fire. Just like in the old stories about cursed objects. Supernatural horror made real. Emma woke up David and Lily. They packed the car in 10 minutes. No discussion. No arguments. They were driving to British Columbia tonight. But Charlotte was already in the back seat when they got to the car, sitting next to Lily like nothing had happened. "How did she get out here?" David asked. Emma didn't answer. There was no logical explanation. They drove through the night. Emma kept checking the rearview mirror. The doll sat perfectly still, but her glass eyes reflected the dashboard lights like mirrors. Like she was watching, waiting. They reached the forest at dawn. Emma led her family back to the treehouse. The hike seemed longer this time. Harder. The tree of damned dolls looked different in daylight. Less mysterious, more sinister. All those porcelain faces staring down at them. Decades of cursed toys hanging from branches. "Lily, give me Charlotte," Emma said. Her daughter clutched the doll tighter. "She doesn't want to go back. She has to. She belongs here. She told me what happened to her family. They tried to send her away too." Emma felt ice water in her veins. "What happened to them?" "They burned up. Charlotte tried to save them, but she was just a doll." Emma looked up at all the other dolls hanging from the tree. Dozens of them, all with the same painted expression. All waiting for families to take them home. "Lily, these dolls are dangerous. They hurt people, only when people try to get rid of them. They just want to be loved." Emma understood the trap now. The dolls attached themselves to children, made the kids love them, defend them. Then they burned down anyone who tried to separate them. "Charlotte has to stay here," Emma said firmly. Lily started crying. "Do you understand? She'll be all alone again. She won to be alone. Look at all the other dolls." But as Emma said it, she realized something horrible. The other dolls weren't companions. They were competition. Each one wanted a child to love them, to take them home. The treehouse was a supernatural trap. Cursed objects waiting for the next victim. Emma grabbed Charlotte from Lily's arms. Her daughter screamed and tried to get the doll back. The doll felt burning hot, like touching a stove burner. Emma climbed the ladder to the treehouse. Charlotte's glass eyes followed her every movement. Inside the treehouse, more dolls lined the walls. Hundreds of them, all different, all watching. Emma set Charlotte on a shelf with the others. The doll's mouth opened slightly, like she was trying to speak. "Stay here," Emma whispered. "Find peace with the others." She climbed back down the ladder. Lily was still crying. "We can't leave her, Mom. She'll be scared. She'll be with her own kind." They hiked back to the car. Lily looked over her shoulder the entire way, tears streaming down her face. But they made it, got in the car, started driving home. Emma felt relief for the first time in weeks. They escaped the curse, returned Charlotte to where she belonged. But 50 miles down the highway, Lily screamed. "It's back! Charlotte, it's back!" Emma looked in the rearview mirror. The doll sat next to Lily. Porcelain face cracked from the heat. Glass eyes glowing like coals. Tears of fire rolled down her cheeks. The car's interior began to smoke. Emma pulled over and grabbed the fire extinguisher. But it was too late. The flames spread faster than seemed possible, like they were fueled by something supernatural. David and Lily got burns trying to escape the car. Emma dragged them clear just before the gas tank exploded. They watched their rental car burn on the side of the highway. Charlotte sat in the back seat, untouched by the flames, crying tears of molten fire. The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later. David and Lily were rushed to the hospital. Emma rode in the front of the ambulance. In the back, paramedics worked to save her family. But through the rear window, she could see the burning car. And Charlotte, still sitting in the flames. Still crying. The doll turned her head and looked directly at Emma. Her cracked lips moved, forming words. "Thank you." Emma understood now. The curse wasn't about keeping the dolls. It was about feeding them. Charlotte had absorbed the life force from their burning car, gotten stronger, and now she was coming home with them whether they wanted her or not. At the hospital, Emma sat in the waiting room. David and Lily were in surgery. Third-degree burns covered most of their bodies. The doctors said they might not survive. Emma felt hollow, empty, like Charlotte had burned out part of her soul too. A nurse approached with Emma's personal effects. Wallet, keys, phone, and Charlotte. "This was in the ambulance," the nurse said. "Thought your daughter might want her doll." Emma stared at Charlotte. The doll looked perfect now. No cracks, no damage from the fire. Like she'd been healed by the flames. How did she get in the ambulance? She was with your family when we arrived. Figured someone grabbed her from the car. But Emma knew better. Nobody could have survived those flames to rescue a doll. Charlotte had saved herself. Emma took the doll and walked to the hospital bathroom. She needed to figure out how to break this curse. But when she looked in the mirror, this reflection showed something different. Behind the doll, his glass eyes, Emma saw flames. An endless fire that had been burning for over a century. And in that fire, she saw faces. The Ashford family, all the other victims who had taken dolls from the tree. They were still burning, still feeding Charlotte's power. Emma realized the truth. The dolls weren't the cursed objects. They were prisons. Each one contained the souls of a family that had tried to escape. Trapped forever in porcelain and paint. Charlotte wasn't crying tears of fire. She was crying the souls of her victims. Emma dropped the doll and ran from the bathroom. But Charlotte was already in the waiting room when she arrived. Sitting in the chair next to where Emma had been, waiting patiently, like a good doll should. Emma couldn't abandon her family, but she couldn't take Charlotte home either. The curse had them trapped, just like all the others. That night, Emma sat vigil beside David's hospital bed. Charlotte sat in the corner chair. Emma could feel the doll's presence like heat from a furnace, waiting for her next opportunity. Around midnight, David's heart monitor started beeping frantically. His body temperature was spiking. The machines couldn't cool him down. Emma looked at Charlotte. The doll's glass eyes glowed softly in the dark. "Stop," Emma whispered. "Please." The doll's expression didn't change, but David's temperature stabilized. Emma understood the bargain now. Charlotte would keep her family alive, but they would never be free. The next morning, doctors said David and Lily were recovering faster than expected. Their burns were healing at an impossible rate. "It's miraculous," one doctor said. "I've never seen anything like it." Emma knew why. Charlotte was feeding them life force, keeping them healthy. But everything came with a price. They went home 3 days later. David and Lily looked normal. No scars, no signs of the terrible burns they suffered. But something was different about their eyes. They reflected light like glass now. Like doll's eyes. Emma realized Charlotte hadn't healed her family. She started turning them into dolls. That night, Emma found David and Lily sitting in the living room, perfectly still, staring at nothing. Charlotte sat between them on the couch. "David," Emma called. He turned his head toward her. The movement was too smooth, too precise, like clockwork. "Hello, Emma," he said. His voice sounded normal, but flat, emotionless. "Are you feeling okay?" "I feel perfect. We all feel perfect." Emma looked at Lily. Her daughter smiled, but the expression was painted on. Artificial. "Lily, do you want to play outside?" "No, thank you, Mommy. Charlotte says we should stay inside where it's safe." Emma felt panic rise in her chest. Her family was disappearing, being replaced by something else. Something controlled by Charlotte. She had to break the curse. But how? Emma remembered the research she'd done. The tree of damned dolls. All those families who disappeared. Maybe the answer was in the forest. She waited until David and Lily were asleep. Then she drove back to British Columbia. The 6-hour drive felt like 6 days. Every mile took her further from her family, but closer to answers. She reached the forest at dawn, hiked back to the treehouse. But something was different. The dolls hanging from the branches looked more lifelike now. Their painted faces seemed to track her movement. Emma climbed the ladder to the treehouse. Inside, she found what she was looking for. A journal, hidden under a loose floorboard. The final entries of the Ashford family. Day 12. The dolls are moving at night. Sarah found them in different rooms this morning. James thinks the children are playing pranks. But I know better. Day 15. The dolls are talking to the children, whispering things. The girls spend hours having conversations with them, but I only hear one side. Day 18. Elizabeth tried to burn her doll today. It wouldn't catch fire. The flames just went out, like the doll was absorbing them. Day 22. The dolls are crying. Real tears. They sad because they alone. They want to be part of our family forever. Day 25. I understand now. The dolls aren't toys. They vessels. Each one contains the spirit of a child who died in these woods. They were trying to possess our daughters. Day 28. It's too late. The girls are changing. Their eyes are glassy. They move like marionettes. The dolls are taking over. Day 30. I'm going to burn down the cabin. It's the only way to stop this. If we all die together, maybe our souls can escape. But if anyone reads this, Remember, Dawn, to take the dolls. They were not abandoned toys. They were traps, each one hungry for a new family to consume. Emma closed the journal. Now she understood. The dolls were the spirits of children who died in the forest over the centuries. Native children, settlers, campers, all of them trapped in porcelain prisons, all of them desperate to live again. They possessed families slowly, subtly, turning parents and children into perfect dolls. Then they burned down the house. Start over with new victims. An endless cycle of supernatural horror. Emma had to get back to her family. Had to save them before the transformation was complete. But when she climbed down from the treehouse, Charlotte was waiting at the bottom. The doll stood upright in the dirt, glass eyes glowing with inner fire. You shouldn't have come back, Charlotte said. The doll's lips moved when she spoke. Her voice sounded like Lily, but older, sadder. I am not going to let you hurt my family. I am not hurting them. I am saving them, making them perfect. They will never get sick, never get old, never die. I'll never live either. Charlotte's expression shifted. For a moment, Emma saw the real child trapped inside. A little girl who died over a century ago. I just want a family, Charlotte whispered. I've been alone so long. Emma felt a moment of sympathy, but she pushed it down. You can't steal someone else's family. It's not right. They love me now. Lily loves me. She chose me because you made her. That is not real love. Charlotte, his eyes flared with anger. The temperature around Emma dropped 20 degrees. You don't, do you understand? You can, do you understand? You've never been dead. The other dolls in the tree began to whisper. Dozens of voices. All the trapped children calling out. Join us. Stay with us. Be our family forever. Emma backed away, but the voices followed her. We're so lonely. So cold. We just want to be warm again. Emma ran through the forest. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Small feet chasing her through the trees. She reached her car and drove away as fast as possible. In the rearview mirror, she saw shapes moving between the trees. All the dolls from the treehouse, walking on their own, following her home. Emma drove through the night, praying she'd reach her family in time. But when she pulled into her driveway, she knew she was too late. The house was glowing, not with electric lights, with an inner fire. Through the windows, Emma could see David and Lily, sitting perfectly still. Their skin had a porcelain sheen now. They were almost completely transformed. Emma ran inside. Her family turned to look at her. Their movements were synchronized, mechanical. Hello, Emma, they said in unison. Welcome home. Charlotte sat between them, no longer hiding her true nature. The doll, his eyes burned like coals. Her painted smile stretched wider than any human mouth could. It is time, Charlotte said. Time for you to join us. Emma felt heat building in the room. The walls began to smoke. This was how it always ended. The house would burn, the family would die, and Charlotte would find new victims. Emma had one chance, one desperate plan. She grabbed Charlotte and ran toward the fireplace. If you burn down my house, you coming with us. The doll laughed. Fire can hurt me. I am fire, maybe, but I am betting you can to survive being scattered. Emma smashed Charlotte against the brick hearth. The doll, its porcelain face cracked. Charlotte screamed, not with her voice, with the voices of all her victims. A century of trapped souls crying out at once. Emma kept smashing. Pieces of porcelain flew everywhere. But with each impact, the house got hotter. The fire was building. Soon the whole place would be an inferno. Emma looked at David and Lily. They were still sitting on the couch. But their eyes were clearing. The spell was breaking. Run! Emma shouted. Get out of the house. Her family stumbled toward the door, moving like people again. Not dolls. Emma followed them outside just as the windows exploded. Flames poured out of every opening. But this wasn't normal fire. It burned cold. Blue flames that made no heat. Supernatural fire. The accumulated rage of all Charlotte's victims. Emma's house burned to the ground in 10 minutes. When the fire department arrived, they found nothing but ashes. And in the center of the destruction, a single intact object. Charlotte's head, cracked but whole, glass eyes still glowing softly, still watching, still waiting. The fire chief handed the doll, his head to Emma. Weird thing, everything else burned completely, but this survived without a scratch. Emma took Charlotte's remains. The porcelain felt warm, alive. That night, staying in a hotel, Emma woke to the sound of crying. Charlotte's head sat on the dresser. Tears of fire rolled from her glass eyes. But these tears were different. Smaller, weaker. The doll was dying. Emma understood. Destroying Charlotte's body had broken her power. But not completely. The head still contained all those trapped souls, including Charlotte herself. "Please," the doll whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "Put me back together. I promise I'll be good." Emma looked at her family. David and Lily were sleeping peacefully, no longer showing signs of transformation. They were free, but Charlotte wasn't. Emma made a decision she'd regret forever. She drove back to the tree of damned dolls. One last time, Charlotte's head sat in the passenger seat, crying softly. "Thank you," the doll whispered. "I knew you. Do you understand? I am not doing this for you. I'm doing it for all the souls you've trapped." Emma reached the treehouse as the sun rose. She climbed the ladder with Charlotte's head. Inside, she found the perfect spot, a shelf where the head would fit. But as she set Charlotte down, the doll spoke one final time. "You know this one, do you? I'll find another family. I always do." Emma looked into Charlotte's cracked face. Behind the glass eyes, she saw flames. And in those flames, the faces of all the victims. Maybe, but not today. Emma climbed back down the ladder, walked away from the tree of damned dolls. She didn't look back, but she could hear Charlotte calling after her, begging her to return. Emma kept walking. Behind her, the other dolls in the tree began to whisper, welcoming Charlotte home, or maybe plotting their next escape. Emma never found out which. She moved her family to Seattle, started over, tried to forget about cursed dolls and supernatural forests. But sometimes, late at night, she'd wake up to the smell of smoke. And in the distance, she'd hear a child crying. Tears of fire in the darkness, waiting for the next family to find her. The tree of damned dolls still stands in the British Columbia wilderness. Local hikers report seeing it from time to time, covered in porcelain faces, glass eyes watching the forest. And sometimes, if you listen carefully, you can hear them whispering, calling for new families, new children to love them, new homes to burn down. Charlotte's head still sits on its shelf, cracked but patient. Her glass eyes reflect every visitor who climbs to the treehouse, memorizing their faces, learning their names, planning her next escape, because some curses never die. They just wait for the right moment to begin again. And somewhere in America, a family is planning a camping trip, looking for adventure in the deep woods. They'll find more than they bargained for. The tree of damned dolls is always hungry for new souls. And Charlotte is ready to come home again. Story 6. Perfect American Lawn. Sarah's hands shake as she stares at the security footage. 3:33 a.m. Again, the sprinklers hiss to life, spraying that rust-colored water across her perfect suburban Illinois lawn. But that is not what makes her blood run cold. It is the shadows crawling across the grass on all fours. She bought this house 6 months ago. The American dream, white picket fence, emerald grass so perfect it looked fake. The neighbors said the previous owners just vanished one night, left everything behind, even their morning coffee still warm on the kitchen counter. Sarah should have listened. The first sign came 3 weeks after moving in. Perfect circles of dead grass appeared overnight, 27 of them, arranged in 3 rows of 9, each circle exactly 18 inches wide. The lawn care company had no explanation. They'd never seen anything like it in 30 years of business. Then came the handprints, tiny ones, child-sized, pressed deep into the soil around each dead circle. But no children lived on Maple Street. Haven, for years. The neighbors made sure of that. Sarah replays the footage. The shadows move wrong, too fluid, too fast. They crawl from circle to circle, heads tilting down to the grass. Their tongues dart out, licking the dew from each blade with supernatural precision. The horror of it makes her stomach turn. She calls the police. Officer Martinez arrives within 20 minutes. He's seen this before. He says, 3 other houses on Maple Street. Same patterns, same footage, same rust-colored water from sprinkler systems that should only contain clean city water. But he won't tell her what happened to those other families. Sarah discovers the truth in the basement. Behind a false wall she finds journals, dozens of them, each written by a different homeowner. The entries span 60 years, all describing the same supernatural events, the same crawling shadows, the same perfect circles of death spreading across their American lawns. The final entry chills her to the bone. They were not trying to kill the grass. They refeeding it. The lawn ice and dying. It is changing, growing, learning. Each circle marks another feeding ground, another soul absorbed into the earth. The previous owners didn't vanish. They became part of the lawn, part of something older than this subdivision, older than Illinois itself. Sarah runs outside. The sun sets behind the perfect suburban houses. Her neighbors watch from their windows. Their faces are pale, hollow, like they were looking through her instead of at her. She kneels beside the nearest dead circle. The soil is warm, pulsing, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. She presses her ear to the ground and hears whispers. Dozens of voices speaking in unison. Welcome home, Sarah. We've been waiting. The whispers come from below, from the families who tried to leave, who thought they could escape by selling their houses, moving to new cities, starting fresh lives. But the lawn followed them. It always follows. Sarah looks at her hands. Dirt clings to her palms. But it is not dirt anymore. It is moving, crawling up her wrists like tiny black insects. She tries to brush it away, but it burrows into her skin. The transformation begins at sunset. Her neighbors emerge from their houses. They move in perfect synchronization. Their eyes are black, empty. They kneel on their own lawns and press their faces to the grass. Their tongues dart out, licking the dew just like the shadows in her security footage. This is what they become. This is what she'll become. The American suburban dream turned into a creepypasta nightmare. A ghost story written in rust-colored water and tiny handprints. A horror that spreads from lawn to lawn, house to house, family to family. Sarah tries to run, her feet one to move. Roots have grown through the soles of her shoes. Thin green tendrils wrap around her ankles. The perfect emerald grass pulls her down into the soil where all the other homeowners wait. The sprinkler system activates, 3:33 a.m. exactly. But Sarah doesn't see rust-colored water anymore. She sees blood. The blood of every family that tried to maintain the perfect American lawn. The shadows crawl toward her. Dozens of them now. All the neighbors who came before. All the families who thought they could control something ancient and hungry. Sarah's last coherent thought is about the real estate listing. How it promised the perfect suburban lifestyle. How it never mentioned the feeding schedule. How it never warned her about the things that crawl across perfect lawns at 3:33 in the morning. Her phone buzzes. A text from her realtor. Congratulations on your new home. Remember, maintaining that beautiful lawn is the key to fitting in with your neighbors. They're very particular about appearances on Maple Street. Sarah tries to scream, but only whispers emerge. The same whispers she heard from beneath the soil. The same voices that welcomed her home. Tomorrow morning, a new family will drive down Maple Street. They'll see the for sale sign in Sarah's yard. They'll admire the perfect emerald grass. They'll never notice the 28 circles of dead grass arranged in neat rows. Or the fresh handprints pressed into the soil. The cycle continues. The lawn grows stronger. And somewhere beneath the perfect suburban surface, Sarah joins the chorus of whispers that welcome each new family home.